Nothing popped up, but...
Okay, cool. I guess they're live already.
Alright. Okay. So... where were we at?
CSS layouts.
Okay. We stopped at the end of Flexbox. Oh wait. Yazir, did we need to go to finish up the last on Free Code Camp?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, it's because it's people don't hate people that they aren't around. They hate people that they know. It's that they think they know. But
He finished it up this morning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I finished after we got off. So then we could move on to grids.
Yeah, it's like they
Is my background lit, guys?
anything else. They could have not responded.
It's alright. You can reduce your volume on Discord.
It's just trouble, and there's something like he was doing some sort of like he had outed the previous COO.
You said I could what on Discord?
No, that was for us. We can reduce your volume on Discord, so it's alright.
Okay, thank you.
And then there would have been anything else. But that's like they handled that really poorly. And
Alright, we're ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll read this first one. What is grid layout? A grid is simply a collection of horizontal and vertical lines creating a pattern against which we can line up or design elements. They help us to create designs where elements don't jump around or change width as we move from page to page, providing greater consistency on our websites. A grid will typically have columns, rows, and then gaps between each row and column, commonly referred to as gutters. So,
I mean, I remember how much my mom freaked out the first time I brought a player's handbook.
creating your grid in CSS. Having decided the grid that your design needs, you can use CSS Grid Layout to create that grid in CSS and place items into it. We will look at the basic features of grid layout first and then explore how to create a simple grid system. Defining a grid. As a starting point, download and open the starting point file. In your text editor and browser, you can also see it live here. You will see an example with a container which has some child items. By default, these display in normal flow, so the boxes display one below the other. We will be working with this file for the first part of this lesson, making changes to see how grid behaves. To define a grid, we use the grid value of the display property. As with Flexbox, this switches out on the grid layout and all of the direct children of the container become grid items. Add this to the CSS inside your file. Okay, I'm going to put you guys on mute. I'm going to try to go to another room. If you guys could pick from here for me, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Like it was both the actual like. No, it starts like a number.
Creating your grid in CSS. Having decided on the grid that your design needs, you can use CSS Grid Layout to create that grid in CSS and place items into it. We will look at the basic features of grid layout first and then explore how to create a simple grid system for your project. Defining a grid. As a starting point, download and open the starting point file in your text editor and browser. Okay. You will see an example with a container which has some child items. By default, these display in normal flow, so the boxes display one below
If
the
the
other.
guys come in playing the... Okay. If they do, tell them to kick me out. Because Henry wants them in here.
Sorry, so Henry doesn't want him in here anymore? Or?
No, he wants them in here, so I said if they come, tell them to kick me out.
And then we barricade the door.
Oh, okay, what?
Apparently someone used the restroom and then it's non-functioning.
How did they get in there? There was so much stuff.
No, there wasn't.
No, I mean like right here.
Now it is.
Dang.
So...
Someone really needed to use the bathroom.
No, so I don't know what the fuck went on. But, so it started raining last night. So that means the vent started dripping. So I grabbed the bucket in there, and then as soon as I opened the door, no. Fuck.
So if you wouldn't have went in there, no one would have known.
It probably would have been sitting there until like a month or so.
Until like fungus. Oh shit! Sorry. Am I not on mute, guys?
Are you listening?
I'm so sorry.
I thought you were mute.
No, I thought I was too. Thanks a lot.
Defining a grid. As a starting point, download and open the starting point file in your text editor and browser. You will see an example with a container, which has some child items. By default, these display in normal flow, so the boxes display one below the other. We will be working with this file for the first part of this lesson, making changes to see how grid behaves. To define a grid, we use the grid value of the display property. As with Flexbox, this switches on grid layout, and all the direct children of the container become grid items. Add this to the CSS inside your file. Unlike Flexbox, the items will not immediately look any different. Declaring display grid gives you a one-column grid, so your items can continue to display one below the other as they do in normal flow. To see something that looks more grid-like, we will need to add some columns to the grid. Let's add 3 200 pixel columns here. You can use any length unit or percentages to create these column tracks.
No, not really.
Add the second declaration to your CSS rule, then reload the page. You should see the items have rearranged themselves one into each cell of the created grid. No, you don't have to copy the whole thing, just the grid template columns line.
Just these?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, right here in grid. It's already in there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Flexible grids with the FR unit. In addition to creating grids using lengths and percentages, we can use the FR unit to flexibly size grid rows and columns. This unit represents one fraction of the available space in the grid container. Change your track listing to the following definition, creating 3 1FR tracks. Okay. So just change the grid template column. You should now see that you have flexible tracks. The FR unit distributes space in proportion. Therefore, you can give different positive values to your tracks. For example, you can change the definition like so. 2FR, 1FR, 1FR.
So they want 2FR and then 1FR. Oops. Oh, okay. So 1, 2. So it takes up to.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first track now gets 2. The first track now gets 2FR of the available space, and the other tracks get 1FR, making the first track larger. You can mix FR units and fixed length tracks. In such a case, the space needed for the fixed tracks is taken away before the space is distributed to the other tracks. The FR unit distributes available space, not all space. Therefore, if inside it, there will be less free space to share out. Okay. Gaps between tracks. To create gaps between tracks, we use the properties grid column gap for gaps between columns, and grid column gap and grid row gap for gaps between rows, and grid gap to set both at once. Okay. Okay, so it just spaces out the whole thing. These gaps can be of any length unit or a percentage, but not an FR unit. Note: the star gap properties used to be prefixed by grid, but this has been changed in the spec, as the intention is to make them usable in multiple layout methods. At the moment, Edge and Firefox support the non-prefixed version, and the prefixed version will be maintained as an alias, so will be safe to use for some time. To be on the safe side, you could double up and add both properties to make your more.
Did something happen? I can't hear anything now. Arjun, are you talking? I can't hear you. That's weird. Yeah, I can't hear. I can't even. Oh wait, you're kind of. I think.
Oh, okay.
There you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Repeating track listings. You can repeat all or a section of your track listings using repeat notation. Change your track listing to the following. You will get 3 1FR tracks just as before. The first value passed to the repeat function is how many times you want the listing to repeat, while the second value is the track listing, which may be 1 or more tracks that you want to repeat. Okay.
Okay.
The implicit and explicit grid. We have only specified column tracks so far, and yet rows are being created to hold our content. This is an example of the explicit versus implicit grid. The explicit grid is the one that you create using grid template columns or grid template rows. The implicit grid is created when content is placed outside of that grid, such as into our rows. The explicit and implicit grid are analogous to the main and cross flagbox axis. By default, tracks created in the implicit grid are auto-sized, which in general means that they are large enough to fit their content. If you wish to give the tracks, the browser creates a size you can use, grid auto rows and grid auto column property. If you add grid auto rows, the value of 100 pixel to your CSS, you will see that those created rows are now 100 pixel tall. Are you sure that's the file?
Huh?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so that's 100. Oops.
1 second.
So rows is horizontally.
The boxes should
be like this.
Come in a grid like that, yeah.
Let me see. Repeat. 3FR. 3. Oh! I know what I did. Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. The min-max function. Our 100 pixel tall tracks won't be very useful if we add content into those tracks that is taller than 100 pixel, in which case it would cause an overflow. It might be better to have tracks that are at least 100 pixel tall and can still expand if more content gets into them. A fairly basic fact about the web is that you never really know how tall something is going to be. Additional content or larger font size can cause problems with designs that attempt to be pixel perfect in every dimension. The min-max function lets us use a minimum and maximum size for a track. For example, min-max 100 pixel auto. The minimum size is 100 pixel, but the maximum is auto, which will expand to fill the content. Try changing grid auto rows to use a min-max value.
Alright. Min-max.
It won't change anything actually, but if you add extra content, you will see the track expands to allow it to fit. Note that the expansions happen right along the row.
So if I was...
You'll have to add it. Oh, yeah, that will reduce the size. Yeah. Okay. As many columns as will fit. We can combine some of the things we have learned about track listing, repeat notion and min-max to create a useful pattern. Sometimes it is helpful to be able to ask Grid to create as many columns as will fit into the container. We do this by setting the value of grid template columns using repeat notation. But instead of passing in a number, pass in the keyword autofill. For the second parameter of the function, we use min-max with a minimum value equal to the minimum track size that we would like to have and a maximum of 1 fr. Try this to your file now using the below CSS.
Gosh. Okay.
This works because Grid is creating as many 200 pixel columns as will fit into the container, then sharing whatever space is left over between all of the columns. The maximum is 1 fr, which, as we already know, distributes space evenly between tracks. Line-based placement. We now move on to we now move on from creating a grid to placing things on the grid. Our grid always has lines. These lines start at 1 and relate to the writing mode of the document. Therefore, in English, column line 1 is on the left hand side of the grid and row line 1 at the top. In Arabic, column line 1 would be on the right hand side, as Arabic is written from right to left. We can place things according to these lines by specifying the start and end line. We do this using the following properties: grid column start, grid column end, grid row start, grid row end. These properties can all have a line number as the value. You can also use the shorthand properties: grid column, grid row. These let you specify the start and end lines at once, separated by a slash, a forward slash character. Download this file as a starting point. It has a grid defined already and a simple article outlined. You can see that the auto placement is placing items one into each cell of the grid that we have created. We will instead place all the elements for our site on the grid using the grid lines. Add the following rules to the bottom of your CSS.
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Note: you can also use the value -1 to target the end column of row line and count inwards from the end using negative values. However, this only works for the explicit grid. The value -1 will not target the end line of the implicit grid. Crystal, can you continue from here? I'm not feeling so well right now.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Where did it say you can also use the value -1 to target the end column or row line and count inwards from the end using negative values. However, this only works for the explicit grid. The value -1 will not target the end line of the implicit grid. Alright, positioning with grid template areas. An alternative way to place items on your grid is to use the grid template areas property and giving the various elements of your design a name. Remove the line-based positioning from the last example or re-download the file to have a fresh starting point and add the following CSS. Okay. This is different. Ooh, okay. Let's just do this. All right, so we have this. Just copy paste all these so I go quick. Alright, well, reload the page and you will see that your items have been placed just as before without us needing to use any line numbers. Okay, so this is what they mean by the line number: grid column, grid row, and header, content, sidebar, footer. Okay. The rules for grid template areas are as follows. You need to have every cell of the grid filled. To span across 2 cells, repeat the name. To leave a cell empty, use a period. Areas must be rectangular. You can't have an L-shaped area, for example. Areas can't be repeated in different locations. You can play around with our layout, changing the footer to only sit underneath the content and the sidebar to span all the way down, for example. This is a very nice way to describe a layout, as it is obvious from the CSS exactly what is happening. So you can play around on your layout, changing the footer to only sit underneath the content. So would it be like this? Sidebar to span all the way down. Ew, how would I do that? Let's see, will I do that? So footer disappeared. Oh, okay. So header, sidebar, sidebar, header, content, footer. Got it. Oh man. Okay. A CSS grid framework. Grid frameworks tend to be based around 12 or 16 column grids, and with CSS Grid, you don't need any third-party tool to give you such a framework. It's already there in the spec. All right, download the starting point file. This contains a container with the 12-column grid defined and the same markup as we used in the previous two examples. We can now use line-based placement to place our content on the 12-column grid. Hold on. Something's wrong here. Okay, something's going on here. Oh. Well. Do we have an article, a side, and a footer? So we have these two already. Dude. What am I doing wrong, guys? Alright, grid frameworks tend, this contains a container with the 12-column grid defined and the same markup as we used in the previous two examples. We can now use line-based placement to place our content on the 12-column grid. Okay. What am I doing wrong, guys? Okay. Footer, grid, column, 15, and then aside, did I do it right? No, I didn't. Oh, okay, I did. All right. So it looks like I'm missing something up here. I'm missing this. It's on the header. What is it? The header's missing. Let's do this. There it is. Alright. If you use the Firefox Grid Inspector to overlay the grid lines on your design, you can see how our 12 column grid works. Okay. Alright, summary. In this overview, we have toured the main features of Css Grid Layout. You should be able to start using it in your designs. To dig further into the specification, read our guides to grid layout, which can be found below. The background of floats. The float property was introduced to allow web developers to implement simple layouts involving an image floating inside a column of text, with the text wrapping around the left or right of it, the kind of thing you might get in a newspaper layout. But web developers quickly realized that you can float anything, not just images, so the use of float broadened. Our fancy paragraph example from earlier in the course shows how you can use float in the creation of a fun drop cap effect. Floats have commonly been used to create entire website layouts featuring multiple columns of information floated so they sit alongside one another. The default behavior would be for the columns to sit below one another in the same order as they appear in the source. There are newer, better layout techniques available, and so use of floats in this way should be regarded as a legacy technique. In this article, we'll just concentrate on the proper uses of floats. A simple float example. Let's explore how to use floats. We'll start with a really simple example involving float block of text around an element. You can follow along by creating a new index.html file on your computer, filling it with the simple HTML template, and inserting the below code into it at the appropriate places. At the bottom of this section, you can see a live example of what the final code should look like. First, we'll start off with some simple HTML. Add the following to your HTML body, removing anything that was inside there before. Okay. Yeah. Oh my god. No, that's not what I wanted. Jeez. I need my mouse. Oh my gosh.
Scroll to the extreme right and then otherwise you'll paste everything.
Huh? Scroll here?
Yeah, and then select from there. Just quote now.
Oh, that's not gonna help. But that's what I did.
Yeah.
Or I think I just went too far on the other one. Okay. All right. Now apply the following CSS to your HTML using a style element or a link to a separate CSS file of your choice. I guess I could just use this.
This style needs to be in the head. H1 comes in the body.
Set it.
You'll need to create the body tag. Yeah. Yeah, you can just paste it in here.
Wait.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You should also probably create the body tag. You also have to create the body tag of the head. and put the h1 div and p tag inside body.
Okay, so if you save and refresh now, you'll see something much like what you'd expect. The box is sitting above the text in normal flow. To float the text around to add two properties to the box rule. Float. Now if you save and refresh, you'll see something like the following. So let's think about how the float works. The element with the float set on it, the div element in this case, is taken out of the normal layout flow of the document, stuck to the left hand side of the parent container body in this case. Any content that comes below the floated element in the normal layout flow will now wrap around it, filling up the space to right hand side of it as far up as the top of the floated element. There it will stop. Floating the content to the right has exactly the same effect, but in reverse. The floated element will stick to the right and the content will wrap around it to the left. Try changing the float value to right and replace margin right with margin left in the last rule set to see what the result is. Is that what it said? Okay. Well, we can add a margin to the float to push the text away. We can't add a margin to the text to move it away from the float. This is because the floated element is taken out of normal flow, and the boxes of following items actually run behind the flow. You can demonstrate this by making some changes to your example. Add a class as special to the first paragraph of text, the one immediately following the floated box. Then in your CSS, add the following rules. These will give our following paragraph a background color. Add a class as special to the first paragraph of text. Okay. Oh, oopsie. Arjun, you should just go ahead and go. This is going to be on live anyways, and I think it'll be, it's streaming live on W3's Twitter, so you can always go back on it. I mean, Oh, that was weird. It's like they heard me. Yeah, don't worry about it. Get yourself better. Alright. To make the effect easier to see, change the margin right on your float to margin so you can get space underneath the floated box, as in the example below. What? Oh wait, where's that box one? Oh shoot. Where did this one go? So weird. Okay, so it's telling us to do that. Okay, so float value to right and replace margin right with margin left in the last rule set to see what the result is. Well, we can add a margin to the float to push the text away. We can add a margin to the text to move it away from the float. This is because a floated element is taken at a normal flow and the boxes of following items actually run behind the float. You can demonstrate this by making some changes to your example. Add a class of special to the first paragraph of text, the one immediately following the floated box. Then your CSS add the following rules. These will give our following paragraph a background color. Why is mine still on the right? Was I supposed to change this to left too? Thought it didn't say to. Alright. To make the effect easier to see, change the margin right on your float to margin. Ugh. So you get space all around the float. You will be able to see the background on the paragraph running right underneath the floated box, as in the example below. Whatever, here we go. Better look like it. Alright. The line boxes of our following element have been shortened so the text runs around the float, but due to the float being removed from normal flow, the box around the paragraph still remains full width. Let me repeat that again. The line boxes of our following element have been shortened so the text runs around the float. Okay. but due to the float being removed from normal float, the box around the paragraph still remains full width. So it's just the text. Clearing floats. We've seen that the float is removed from normal flow and that other elements will display beside it. Therefore, if we want to stop a following element from moving up, we need to clear it. This is achieved with the clear property. In your HTML from the previous example, add a class of clear to the second paragraph below the floated item. Then add the following to your CSS. So, in your HTML from the previous, add a class of clear to the second paragraph. Sedutor. Grid Layout. What should I look at? Okay, this background should be gone. Oh wait. Still there. Alright, okay. By myself. You know what? Hold on. Opening code bin. How about that? That's what I got. You should see that the following paragraph clears the floated element and no longer comes up alongside it. The clear property accepts the following values. Left, clear items floated to the left. Right, clear items floated to the right. Both clears any floated items left or right. Clearing boxes wrapped around a float. You know what? This girl needs to go back. Okay, let us go back to oh no. Nope. Oh, oh. Alright, let's just get on this. Alright, applied accessibility. Let's go back. Add a text alternative to images for visually impaired accessibility. It's likely you've seen an alt attribute on an image tag and other challenges. Alt text describes the content of the image and provides a text alternative. Alright, where's that pen? Okay. Okay, it's likely you've seen an alt attribute on an image tag in other challenges. Alt text describes the content of the image and provides a text alternative. This helps in case the image fails to load or can't be seen by a user. It's also used by search engines to understand what an image contains to include it in search results. Here's an example. Image source equals porn logo blah blah blah. People with visual impairments rely on screen readers to convert web content to an audio interface. They won't get information if it's only presented visually, or they won't get information if it's only presented visually. For images, screen readers can access the alt attribute and read its content to deliver key information. Good alt text is short but descriptive and meant to briefly convey the meaning of the image. You should always include an alt attribute on your image. Per HTML5 specification, this is now considered mandatory. Camper Cat happens to be both coding ninja and actual ninja and is building a website to share his knowledge. The profile picture he wants to use shows his skills and should be appreciated by all site visitors. Add an alt attribute in the image tag that explains Camper Cat is doing karate. The image source doesn't link to an actual file, so you should see the alt text in the display. Okay, so okay. No. No. Okay, be back.